Let me introduce you to my guest today. She is Laura Lukitsch, and she is a story consultant, artist, and filmmaker, helping artists and purpose-driven entrepreneurs show up with authenticity, find their voice, and share their work. I have recently met Laura, and what I love about her is that she walks what she teaches, and she has a very calm way about her, and being around her gives me permission to slow down, be thoughtful, and bring your unique self to the moment. Grab a cup of coffee, hit pause in your day, and join us on a journey of why your inner voice is important, how you can share it with greater ease and genuineness, and why it will be important in your particular corner of the world. Enjoy. I'm Carla Reeves, and this is Differently, a podcast where we explore the ins and outs of what becomes possible when we're willing to think, do, and show up differently to the moments of our everyday lives. Laura, thank you for being here, and I am excited to talk about finding your voice and finding your story because I know that's the amazing work that you do, and I just want to welcome you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so tell us first, I always love to hear people's stories. So what's the story behind this work that you're doing today? What led you here?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. It was the immediate work that I do came out of moving to Germany and leaving my video business, where I was helping other people tell their stories. I'm also a documentary filmmaker, and I love storytelling in that capacity. But when I moved to Germany, I realized I needed to tell my own story. I didn't have a network here, and I wanted to shift out of video production as the work that I do and into story consulting, because that's my favorite part of storytelling, is helping people identify their messages and kind of sift through their stories. But I could not tell my story. I felt very shy and awkward. And so I sought out different ways of trying to find my own voice. And I took a copywriting class. I realized that wasn't the right direction because you need to know your story before you can actually go out and write about it. I worked with some coaches, and I kept coming up against dead ends. Finally, in one of the groups that I was in, somebody said, "Write like you speak." And it really kind of hit me that I did not feel comfortable speaking either. I was always second guessing myself. So I realized I had to go back and do some inner work. And out of that process of finding my own voice, I also realized there are not many people helping at that level of storytelling. And so I created a course called Find Your Authentic Voice, where I put together trainings around what helped me find my passion, identify my passion, and then create my vision, looking at who I want to serve, because I'm very purpose-driven. And then out of that, once I had these two foundational pieces put in place, then I could build on top of that how I want to talk about the work that I do in the world. And so this is what I do for other people, help them talk about the work that they want to do in the world based on getting to know themselves and also looking at the creative process, because it's actually quite natural. I discovered this as a filmmaker. I would get very inspired, right? That creative spark would be there. And then you kind of go to the other side. The fear, right, is always part of a creative process. So it was like, how do I find a way to navigate back so that I can be in flow more often? Kind of not at the total inspiration extreme, which is great, but then I get too many ideas to work on. I have to kind of rein myself in to just finish one project, right? So, so how does creativity operate between these two extremes, and how do I manage to get myself on a pathway into flow, and how do they then bottle that up to help other people?
So take us back to finding your own voice and ability to tell your story, because I think that's so important. And because that inspired the work you're doing today, I have to believe that there was like a spark moment for you, or a moment of like, I got this. Like I kind of like a freeing of yourself to be able to tell your story. Can you take us to a moment where you felt a little bit liberated? And I know it's a journey and it's ever evolving, but can you take us to one of those first moments?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I haven't thought about this for a while, but when you asked it in that way, I remembered I was helping somebody else initially with their video script, and they were working on their personal story for their business. And then I realized I needed to go through my discovery process that I work with most of my video clients. And it worked so well with her, and she was an entrepreneur. I thought, well, let me try that on myself, right? I will just ask myself the same questions I ask my clients. And the key to that was like, I think I may have asked similar questions, but I was always critical of myself. So I had to ask myself and actually write them down and remove my inner critic. And when I did that, then I was able to kind of, discover my voice. So it was a process of, I already had the tools there, but I hadn't applied them with myself. And then when I was applying them with myself, I wasn't doing it systematically. And I think I had that inner critic that I had to let go of. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, why isn't there somebody who can just listen to me like I listen to other people? And I realized, oh, I have to do that for myself. So that was my breakthrough moment.
I think that's so important. And I think so many people probably listening can relate to the idea of this inner critic, or this like high level of criticism that we place on ourselves. And we can't even, at least let me speak for myself, that there were years where I couldn't accurately even see myself because there was so much judgment of that I needed to be different, or needed to be like somebody else, or needed to become something better. That I remember in my journal, I had one of those kind of liberating moments where I was writing, and I didn't like how it sounded. I wanted it to sound different. I wanted it to be more brilliant. I just had all that judgment about it. And I kept writing. Something kept me showing up and writing, even though I didn't feel like I was getting the results. And then one day, I say like this girl like skipped across the page of my notebook, and I was like, I want to know her. Like there was like nothing not to like. There was nothing to judge. It was just real and pure. And that like kind of lit a little fire in my heart. Like I want to know her, and I want to get to know her. And for me, it happened really on the pages of my journal. And as I got a little bit braver, I would let her out in real life slowly. And so it's such an important process. So anything about, the inner critic when we're doing this and wanting to find our voice and story that you has helped you, or you use to help your clients?
Yes, I developed what I call 15 strategies to get into action. And I analyzed, I really have an amazing way of finding fear all the time. So, but also moving
Like a
past
magnet.
it. Yes. Um, it pops up, and maybe it's just because I've been paying attention to it, because I know that throughout my life I've done brave things. I've moved to India to go to graduate school. I moved to Japan. A lot about moving, but also working on my documentary film. So I've had to come up against and kind of flow around resistance many times in my life. And basically over the last 2-3 years, I just started identifying every time they came up. And I identified 8 places where we resist showing up in the first place, and 8 places where I at least resist sharing my voice. And one of my favorite tools, so there are many tools that a lot of people will know. One of them is taking baby steps, creating milestones. I love baby steps. One of my favorite tools is to do what I call the pause, which is something I'm sure a lot of people who have done development work are familiar with. The technique that I use may have been inspired by RAIN, which is a technique taught by Tara Brach. She's a psychologist and a Buddhist teacher. And that stands for recognize, acknowledge, investigate, nurture. But there is this power in, if something is coming up and you are feeling a sense of resistance, to just stop and name it. And so I kind of have taken that into my own creative process, that anytime I started using it when I was creating the course. I was writing all of my modules, and I was finding myself overwhelmed. I would get stuck, and I would get up and I would chop vegetables. And then as I was chopping vegetables, all of a sudden ideas flooded into my mind. So then I would run back and start typing, continuing the scripting that I was doing. Finally, I started realizing, this is something I'm going to just keep using. So every time I get stuck, I'm going to just bring the computer into the kitchen and start chopping my vegetables. If I was really stuck, I would go for a walk. And so I just started using this pause. I also started using it before going to sleep. I would, if I was stuck on a bigger challenge that I didn't know how to articulate, I would read over the script before going to sleep, or I would ask myself a question, like, how do I solve this problem? It's probably not exactly the question I would ask, but how do I deal with this particular concept I wanted to share? And then I would go to sleep, and then I would tend to wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I would write. It would come to me.
I love that.
I would write, and actually I wrote my books that way too. I wrote several books over the winter, and basically for 5 months I was up at 3 or 4 in the morning almost every night writing the book. I would write 1 or 2 chapters, in fact, and then go back to sleep until 10 o'clock and then get up and start writing again.
So I've done the sort of sitting with a question idea before taking a walk, but I've never done it before going to sleep. So when you were writing your books, did you ask a question about something about what you were writing next and then go to sleep and sort of wake up with answers and inspiration?
Exactly. And I had actually done that when I worked on my documentary film, when I got stuck, and I probably was stuck for 3 weeks before I used that technique, and was able to come up with ideas in the morning of how to get by a particular editing block. And so then I had forgotten about it. I didn't use that technique, but then when I was writing, that's what I did. I would either read the chapter I had just written and up until the point where I'd stopped and then let my brain work on it while I was sleeping, or I would ask a specific question.
Ask a new question, and often that question will lead you to the next place. And so I love this for the writing process and feeling stuck. But I also want to bring us back to this idea of, because I think you and I could talk about writing all day. But I want to bring us back to this finding our voice and finding our story. And I want to hear from you, like, why, for people listening, why is this important?
Interesting question for me, because I realize now that I've been assuming that everybody thinks it is important. Maybe that's not the case.
Well, and somebody listening maybe hasn't thought about this before,
I think it's really powerful to be in alignment with what it is that we want to do and bring to the world. And I think for me personally, I've been able to have deeper connections with people. So it's not just about, I started looking for my voice so that I could help people with my business and what I do and how I help them share their stories. But I have found that I've made closer friendships. Like, it's spilled out into other places of my life. I've more in touch with what I really enjoy doing, which is where I got to write the books, but also really integrate in my life over the last year, kind of curating my circle of influence, what I call curating my circle of influence, which is like really being conscientious about what kind of content I'm allowing into my life. And a lot of the content I seek out is around arts, is around educating myself on what's happening in terms of race issues in the US, educating myself around what's happening in terms of immigration issues. So I do look at kind of, and how can we kind of come together as humanity, right? I think there are a lot of people now looking at how can we contribute more to the world in different areas. So I'm being much more conscientious about that. And that feeds my work and makes me
well, and I think people connect on stories, right? Like, you see, like, that's been for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? People connect over stories. And I think it is a bridge for connection. And when you hear, I think so often we can feel like, oh, our story isn't important, or I don't have a story to share, but we all have a story. And I think when we do find our voice and are willing to share that, it does create a bridge of connection. I just had that happen this morning listening to a video, and this guy was talking and sharing information. And then suddenly he stopped and told his personal story. And like, I just naturally leaned in and like wanted to get closer, and now felt more deeply connected to the messenger, that was talking in the first place. And so I think it is a way that we connect with not only with ourselves, but with other people. So I love the work that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about your, like, what you're up to now and what you're taking people through, because I know you have a challenge going on and are going to create another one soon.
Yeah, thank you. This particular challenge I call Own Your Story, and I might do it a second time because it's fun for me to watch people kind of discovering their own story. And it's 3 days where we look at people's why they want to tell their story in the first place, who they want to work with. So The challenge is more for entrepreneurs and artists. It's not about a general story, telling your story for something like The Moth. It's more of the story of what you're bringing to the world, what it is that you want to share. And today we're going to be going over kind of the realization story, what you asked me earlier about, like, when did this happen? What was that spark? So today we're going to be looking at people's sparks. So, and I think people get stuck on the story. And I wanted to show that, yes, you can spend time crafting it, but if you go through a specific process, it doesn't have to be very difficult. So that's
I
what
think
we're
I just
working on.
saw an email that you sent out called your one word or something. Is that part of the challenge? And is that something you can share with us?
It's not part of the challenge. I just kind of sent
Oh,
that
it's
as,
different. Okay.
yeah, it's different. But I love the one word. I call it the formula, but this is for when people are meeting each other in person, generally in real life. So the Own Your Story is about maybe how people are going to craft their story and put it on their website or talk about it more officially. But I find that the one word is an alternative to an elevator pitch. And it's something that's actually helped me. I think I went to France because of that. I've done made so many connections because of just saying, when I show up and meet people, I share my title, what I'm doing. At the time, I was a filmmaker. And I say, I'm working on a project about, and then your one word. And it just then opens up a space for conversation. So instead of telling people I do this and this is who I help, etc., that one word is kind of a theme of the work that you're working on. And I think also for somebody who's shy, like I've been, if I tell people I'm working on a project about parks in Berlin, everybody in Berlin has a story about a park, or they're curious about a park, or so it gets me off the hook. I don't have to talk, but this is also a way then you get to know people. So then the conversation can flow naturally.
I really, really like that because I don't know about others, but for me, I just have never liked the question of what do you do? And especially as a coach, like I don't really like to say that I'm a coach because it doesn't give merit to the really deep and important work that I get to do and the window that I have into people's lives and like what occurs inside of it. Like it's so rich. And so I'm so curious. I'm going to have to come up with one word. We may have to have a separate conversation.
Yeah, I
But
was just going to ask that same question. What would you say? What would your one word be? And it could be just a theme of what you're thinking about also. You're thinking about writing. I know that.
I am thinking about writing right now. And it could be, I mean, that could be one word that could lead to if somebody was curious, because writing is a huge part of my work with clients. And there's a lot of reasons why that's so. And, but you're right. I love the idea of just piquing someone's curiosity. Because there's nothing worse than somebody asking somebody what they do and them going on and on and on without really permission to go on and on and on. And that way you leave it in their hands. Like if they're curious to know more, they're going to ask. They're going to ask a secondary follow-up question. And it could lead to a far more interesting place the way you're setting it up. So Laura, I know you have so many other resources. And I just want to hear a little bit about what does it look like for someone to work with you? Like, is there a journey that you take? And can you just give us a snapshot of that?
Yes, I have 3 group programs. One is the direction workshop, and that's for people that I work with a lot of people that are multi-passionate, or they're kind of in the transition and they have a decision to make and they're unable to make it. So it's a 2-part 2 to 3 hour program, depending on the number of people that join. And it really helps them clarify what their next step will be. And so far, everybody has been able to make a decision once they've gone through that process. So it's really fun for me to do that process. And I am starting to offer that once a month. So that's on the website if people are interested. I also have my signature program, which is Find Your Authentic Voice. And the doors to that will open this month, which is June of 2021. And the program will start in August. And that's an 8-week program. I started it as a beta at 2 weeks, but people wanted it to be longer. And then I did a version at 3 weeks and people wanted it to be longer. So now I've made it 8 weeks. And this is where we go through these foundational pieces, right? Identifying somebody's spark and helping people clarify their vision for what they want to do and who they want to serve and what their why is. And in my world, I found it very difficult to identify one why. So I look at, for people that are creatives and entrepreneurs, I see that they have 4 whys. There's the personal reason for doing something, professional reason, the reason around who they want to serve, and then the reason for the world. You know, what impact do they want to make in the world? So we go through that. And then in the program, we work on helping them craft their story and give them space to test their story and also look at their value, what value they're bringing to the people that they're serving. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. And then I also have started what I call the Story Lab Mastermind. So people that have their story but want to expand their reach, they work together in a group. It's an open enrollment, but people come on. We do the visioning kind of workshop one-on-one over two days, and then they come in with their goal, and then I support them as they are working on expanding their reach. So one of the people that's in that is now wants to be a thought leader around issues of cultural appropriation of indigenous Mexican people's work. So he's working on that, and that's been really exciting. He's starting to build his platform.
Awesome. I think you have some resources too, if I'm not mistaken, around writing, or are there some, I think you have like a 10-step process or something. Am I remembering something right around writing for people listening that may be curious to do a little bit more writing? I know you have a whole bunch to share about that too, that we won't go into today, but maybe we'll come back and have you share about your 3 books in winter, because I think that's a powerful story. But is there a resource that I'm remembering, or a
about writing? I probably made a blog. Oh, I did a free workshop. So that I have stored. I don't have it available, but if people want to have access to it, it's on Vimeo. I could send them the link to that. Okay. But I am working on making available once or twice a month. I want to do either a workshop or a challenge or something that like people can come in, sample what I do, and get a tangible result from this little workshop or master class that I do. So because I really like sharing this work and also interacting with people. So
awesome. I believe that people are going to want to check out your work and the stuff that you're doing. It's so important. And I think that for someone listening that maybe wants to just take a baby step, like you talked about, what's one step that they could start to take today?
I think a good baby step would be, besides the one word, and it's on the website. They can check that out, because really that helps people understand, like, what is my theme? I mean, it's a very easy, small step on one level, but it's very profound on another level, to look at your what you're working on and pick out one word or one phrase, because that, like, really taps into the through line of what you want to stand for in the world. But that is one thing. The other baby step people could take is just ask themselves about why they're doing what they're doing, and take some time to journal on that, and looking at these 4 areas: the personal, professional, service, and world.
Mm, I love that. I love that. I think that's so important. I know that the people I work with, and I know probably the people that you work with, there's just, there's always a deeper desire to have that bigger why, or have that purpose behind what we're doing each and every day. And I think so often we get stuck in this mentality that we have to find our purpose. And I believe that it's already here, and often it's removing things and eliminating the barriers that are preventing us from seeing it or feeling it or being it. And I love that.
Yeah,
So
that's exactly. Actually, I wrote a blog post about that, about
you did.
authenticity, which, yeah, where I talk about, you have to let go. Let
Mm.
go of a lot of shoulds and I forget, I have to say, I've been doing this work for now 4 years, and I forget how it felt to not be where I am today. So just you mentioning that reminds me, yeah, how many shoulds I had to let go of.
Yes. And as you let those go, there's something underneath all of that that emerges if you're willing to kind of stay in the process and release. Because I think so often we think we have to seek or find or figure something out. And I often think we have to flip that upside down, and it's really about releasing and making space for that to emerge. So I love that.
Yeah,
What are
so
you
beautiful.
most
Thank you.
excited about? And yeah, what are you most excited about today, inspired about inside of the work you're doing?
Well, this is something a little bit different, but on the month of July, I'm doing an artist residency. So
Ooh. Where?
um, it's halfway between Berlin, where I live, and Hamburg. So about 2.5 hours from where I live, and kind of in the middle of of nature. It's a very small town, and I am going to try to figure out how to have fun and be an artist. So I'm excited to see what that. Of course, I have about 5 projects I have in mind, but I'm going to try to let go and see kind of what comes through, and which one I end up is pulling at my heart.
I love
Yeah.
that. You have choices and options. What form of art is this? You're writing, or what form of art will you be experimenting or
I
playing with
applied
inside
to
of that?
for this to do my writing, but that would be that I was heavily into writing, and I finished that book in April. So now that it turned out to be summer, I have video work that I'm working on, um, part of a bigger project which I call Park Project Berlin, and most likely I'll be working on a video about the Berlin Wall 30 years later, what people's hopes and dreams were when the wall came down in 1989,
Mm.
and how things have turned out. Were expectations met? Did unity really happen? And what is still left to be
Mm.
unfold? Because I think, yes, there's the dialogue that I learned in the US is very different than what I'm learning in Germany. So I want to bring some of these issues out that haven't really been talked about in certain contexts. And it's really interesting. I've already interviewed 5 people for that. So I think this might come to the top of my list.
I love that. Well, I'm excited to see. And lastly, I like to ask most of my guests this question as we close is, what does differently mean to you?
I think it means being uniquely you.
I love that. Thank you for sharing your unique self with us and your stories and all your passionate interests and your art and your writing and your work that you do today. I'm excited for people to check you out. And I'm really glad that you and I have recently met and crossed paths. So thank you for your time today. And yeah, we'll have to do this again. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Differently. I hope it stirred your thinking, and I invite you to take one inspired action from something that stood out to you. If you want to hear more conversations like this, hit follow on your favorite podcast app. And if this episode could impact someone you know, please pass it along. Remember, new episodes drop weekly. See you next week.